Hi everyone, and this is our first real video in our SynthGen series. So just a slight caveat for my own peace of mind. I am basically I'm going to be messing around. I'm going to be taking my guesses as to how code works and what the idea is. I am also going to make mistakes. And the same way all the other daily title videos worked, that's going to be kind of how this works now. And so that all being said, feel free to leave me comments or questions or point out things if I make mistakes that I don't figure out. And so from here, let's just kind of go. So this first thing I'm looking at is me messing around with the super square synth. In fact, it's basically a super square synth, except for like if we leave this parfreq as, in fact, actually let's just make it 0 by default, and then we can redo this definition. Okay, and then what you'll hear, this will just sound like the ordinary super. So here, I will. Also, yes, my switching Windows game is still a little weak, but we'll see. So if we do this, so if you haven't watched there's Fairbank's introduction, which I'll try to remember to link to in the description, or other introductions. So when you do a synth in Super Collider, and you want to use it in title, you basically this symbol, because Super Collider's language is scheme meant to look more like C, I guess is a way of thinking of it. It feels it's very lispy to me, but without the syntax. So but yes, you define a symbol, in this case /parsquare, and that is the name you use between quotes when you're doing things in title. So, and I realized that you probably couldn't actually hear. Go back and do that again. Because I realized I forgot to switch which window had focus. So the parsquare here is this is a symbol, and this is what I was saying is kind of like a lispy notion of symbol. Just defining it as a name, and once you've defined it and you've defined the synth def, you can just use it. And so let's do that. And we should be able to hear this. Okay. So it's super square. Now, I defined this other parameter. And so this is one of those nice tricks with the way title was built, and I legitimately love this. Is that even if you don't, is that all these named things are really just little convenience functions around this PF, and then the name of the parameter you're sending to the synth. So in this case, we can have and then we can set it to something, and I'll show you what this does in a second, because it was just something I was messing with. So you can hear that flutter that it's doing, and let's look at what's actually happening in the code here. what's happening in the code is that we made parfreq another parameter, and what we're doing here is we're creating a basically it's a parabolic approximation to a sine wave, is what the docs say about this. And we just give it the frequency, which is, if it's 1, it's just 1 hertz, 2, it's just 2 hertz. And then what we're doing is, with our final sound, we're just multiplying the sound and the parabolic approximation of the sine wave. So it just goes up and down repeatedly, and this is what's convenient about this, is that this is just as it dips down, it creates that flutter effect naturally. We can just multiply signals together. Which is honestly one of my favorite things about doing this stuff in Super Collider, as someone who's has a physics background. I just like the fact that it's not hiding the sort of signal processing aspect here. And so anyway, that's all it's really doing. And of course it does do some goofy stuff if you turn it up really high, which isn't surprising given the way modulating stuff works. So for example, if I turn it up to 200, because after a certain point the oscillation of the other sound starts to dominate the actual overall sound, which is not what we want here. And but cool. So what else do I want to say about this? So one of the things I was trying to think about here is, trying to understand how this works, is we have this whole so as I understand it, what the code here is doing is it's taking the basic envelope, which is so this is one of those things that's kind of funny, is I was confused at first about what the difference between an envelope and an envelope generator is, because you can actually use both in doing a synth def. I believe the idea is that an envelope generator is more useful for if you actually have variable things in the envelope, so other signals inside it. This allows it to be more dynamic as opposed to calculating a fixed shape. And then you stretch the entire time scale with sustain, which is kind of nice. And then this whole done action 2 thing, if you haven't seen this before, is just a way of saying please do garbage collection when it's done. When the envelope is over, that means the sound should be over. Please garbage collect all of this. That's really, from my understanding, all it really means. So then what we're doing here is we have the LFO frequency 1, LFO frequency 2, which is something that I feel like I have never entirely understood in what they're doing here with this definition. it's clearly like they're using it as setting the. They're using it for the definition of this filter here for the what the frequency of the filter should be, and they're ranging it between these two things sinusoidally at this rate, which is like they're using the rate variable to generate, change the frequency of the internal sine wave on the filter itself. But then what we have here is, so this is one of those things I didn't understand at first. What does voice do for, because a bunch of these synths that Tidal uses all have a voice parameter. And, well, what is voice doing? Well, here, so pulse, this is just, it's a square wave, right? But I mean, it's a square wave with a variable width. And by default, the width is just half. So it's going to be half on, half off. And so the voice is just controlling the width, which is kind of cool. I apologize for not muting before that. The air quality is not the best in my city today, so lungs are a little more achy than my normal dry cough, but that's all fine. But anyway, the point here is we can with the sounds here, we can figure out the this is normalized, so that's this first pulse. This first square wave is normalized to be 70%. This is 30% of the sound. You can just add the signals together. They're in phase with each other. Although, I mean, they wouldn't have to be. I suppose this has. I wonder if there's an easy function to change the phase of the square wave. That'd be neat. One thing that's kind of fun is maybe let's, for our first little experiment here, maybe let's change the voice on the second one to be 1-, so that the two square waves are not actually the same width with each other, except at 0.5. Let's just see what that does quick. Okay, the definition was accepted. Let's go back over to Tidal. Let's see how this just sounds. Okay. So it shouldn't really sound any different because we haven't changed the voice, but now let's change the voice to like 0.3 and see what happens when they're different from each other. So one cool thing, and this is actually something I'm going to do here in a second. Let me actually turn the gain down slightly on this. So that what we're actually going to do here is we're going to redefine the synth live, because you can do that. It's Super Collider. It's a live coding system. That all works just fine. So let's try that so we can hear the difference. So I'm going to leave this at 0.8. I'm going to let it go. Then we're going to go back over here to the effect was more subtle than I really wanted, but I decided to add another parameter, Oscillator Balance, and it's going to be 0.5 by default, but you can actually change it so that it controls like the balance between the two different oscillators, which is something that you would have like in a lot of real hardware synths. Okay, so let's try this now. So I feel like that got a pretty decent variation in sounds from honestly just messing around just a little in terms of the parameters. Yeah, I feel like, not sure what else I want to do with this right now. I feel like it was at least a little bit of an interesting experiment. Yeah, I feel like it was at least a little bit of an interesting experiment. yeah, I think maybe I'll kind of leave this here for now. I suppose I can talk about one thing, which was so another thing that I'd been playing with was modifying an example that came from another YouTube channel that does super collider stuff. The channel name was Sound Engraver. I'll say that her super collider stuff is interesting. It's definitely a channel with an ominous aura. But what I will say is that this was just like she put together this really cute tiny example of doing doing just a little kick drum, right? And it works pretty well. You do the frequency sweep down. I was experimenting with different wave shapes, right? If you use a sine wave, that's one thing. In fact, let's even just the lazy way. Let's put the triangle wave frequency down to 0. Just 1. Okay. So now we can do this, and it actually sounds pretty good. Here. And sort of obviously you can we can do another Oscillator Balance parameter. So that's and here. Let's go back over to our title window. Okay. And let's hear how some of this sounds. If I remember right, I'm going to need to turn the gain down slightly. Oh, no. So because it's a balance of the triangle and sine wave, there's kind of a little bit more distorted crunchiness. But let's test it out a little by having slow 4, just sine. Okay. So yeah, you can hear it changing, and so it's kind of neat that you can have like a lot of flexibility that way, just by adding parameters. And that's actually what a big part of the generator code I'm doing is basically finding holes in sort of these natural places, and then creating names, making those names parameters in the synth def, and then so then those are available and configurable. Like for ease of use, eventually I'll have to have a thing that like summarizes them, and I'll probably like doesn't just generate them every place it could be, or else you maybe could end up having something like, 10, 20 knobs on each synth def. I don't know, maybe I want that though. Maybe if they just have reasonable defaults, but then figuring out what reasonable defaults are is going to be another whole deal. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that I'm going to have to figure out about how to make all of that work. But we're these two examples represent like kind of the two base examples of what I need to do. One of which is coming up with things that can be used for melodies, and something that can be used for percussion. And those are kind of the two main classes. I'm not separating it out versus like pad or bass or whatever, like sort of ways people tend to describe synths, because honestly, like all of those should just be different parameters or different subclasses of like melodic versus percussive. So we'll see if that intuition is borne out over the next few weeks. But until then, take care, and I hope this series is interesting.